Above Spirituality, episode 6. I should keep track of that.
So this isn't an ASMR podcast. Somebody told me I was gonna come make noises into a microphone.
That's what the fuzzy part of the microphone is for.
Oh, okay.
So my name's Gino. Viewers of Above Language will probably maybe recognize me from Above Spirituality. I'm here in the studio, aka Casa del Nils, with a big old audience. We got my boy Pat, who we're gonna get to in just a second. Big shout out to Zeus and Ink from the Alchemist Book Club. They're going to be on our next interview. And standard, we got Nils Clausen, Alexander running the back end. So before we get started, I want to introduce my guest, Patt Knerr.
Knerr.
Yep, Patt Knerr is a traveling Chicago artist. He does obviously a lot of mostly painting media. I was fortunate enough to be with Pat just this weekend over at the Underground Art House. Big shout out over there to the people, to Maggie and the crew, where Pat friggin' won the art battle competition, smoked out about 26 or 27 other contestants. Sadly not with this piece, but
it was even better than this piece.
And I love Pat's pieces because I've seen him paint them a couple times, and they're always very we're going to talk a little bit about it. He told me the first time we met, which was at the Underground Art House, that they're very gestalt.
Oh, gestalt for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
And one thing I really love about Pat, and anyone who is local to the area might be interested, Pat does this really amazing thing where he will link up with a client. They'll have a conversation and sort of a guided painting where he will try to capture the energy of the conversation, the image, and produce an original piece, which obviously they get to keep. And if you're interested in that, hit us up on the Instagram page, or even DM.
Put up the Pat symbol. Fucking flash some lights. I'll be there.
Right on, Pat. So, Pat, start off. Just tell me a little bit about this piece. I know we were saying some colorful things about it earlier.
I brought this one out of my collection because feasibility, right? Makes sense. Smaller piece. So this is more of a pragmatic thing. But so I had a surgery on my butt the other day.
I did hear about that.
That was a good time. I actually won that painting contest with bandages in my ass.
I had heard you weren't.
We're starting off straight.
I had heard you weren't feeling well, but I had not heard it was the rear end.
This is my tactic. Is we're going to the deep end first. We're going to talk about my ass. And it was it was kind of weird. I hit up the host of the event, and I was like, I don't know if I can come, man. I feel like garbage. This might be a weird one to show up for. And 30 minutes later, I was like, I gotta go give it a shot. So. Yeah, as much fun as I was having, I was struggling that day. We could probably flash an image of that painting, I'm sure, through editing.
I think Alexander might be capable of doing this.
Right here. There it is. But yeah, so this piece is kind of reminiscent to the same approach that I had for that piece. I actually motifed some of the images that are kind of in here, like some of the shapes. And this was kind of the starting point for that art battle painting. But you nailed it by saying gestalt. Like, for people that don't know that term, it's like Rorschach, so ink blotters, or you're staring at a cloud, you're staring at these like monotonous kind of like patterns, and then you project an entity or image inside of it. And so for me, I remember when I was younger and I was being kind of rallied to go to college for art, there was this, and this is like so hilarious in my mind, like, you'd get those like college recruiters that come to your class, they're like, all right kids, it'll be worthwhile to throw down money for an art school, let's see what you got, and they do these really tacky like exercises to get your attention, and this one lady, she came in and she did the most like just hilarious thing where she was like, hey, I'm gonna hand out paper and everyone's gonna draw a picture of a pig, and then the papers went back to her and she was like, all right, so really what I wanted to do is just read and show like this one side of art, of subjectivity. And I'm like looking back.
Try to keep your mic a little closer.
Yeah, looking back, it was hilarious because like, what is this college recruiter doing on the deep end of shit? She should have been like, here's our faculty, here's our campus. But she was like, draw a pig. And she had me on the hook. I was like, all right, this is interesting. But like, she really pointed out like, all right, if your pig is looking to the left, if it's just the head, and she like broke it down on like kind of like a forensic study of what the image, the subjectivity going into it is trying to explain, or has some sort of annotation toward. And so that was kind of like just like one of those moments where at a younger age, 17 or whatnot, I was like, yeah, so everything's subjective. Like every person has a different affiliation with a pig or whatever it may be. And so for me, it's like, like you have this landscape that's on the wall here. That's the kind of art that I love in my houses. You know what I'm saying? Like I want that to look at, but like the work that I make, I don't necessarily like to look at it. It's just more of like a fun exercise for me. And thank God I've got clients that like to look at this, and not to say it's ugly or anything. It's just, it's like a brain puzzle. You know what I'm saying? So like at different points of the day, you're going to reflect different, like you're going to maybe focus more on some of the darkness here, maybe some of the lightness. And, a lot of the times these paintings flip. So like
I was just about to mention, because I mean, you could see it in a number of different ways.
100%. And so like, I mean, for me, it's just all the different, one of the most potent forces of art itself is the ability to kind of like reflect into a painting. You know what I'm saying? So it's not just like a picture of a pig, but it's kind of allowing you to see a little bit in between the cracks of your own thinking and projecting meaning into things,
It's kind of interesting because, I wasn't raised particularly artistic, or, like, I don't recall my parents really taking me to a lot of, like, the many awesome art galleries and museums in Chicago. Right. And it wasn't until my, like, later 20s. I was dating this really lovely woman, and she was quite the artist, mostly a musician, and very, very spiritual person. Anyway, she kind of took me to galleries, and it's so weird to say, like, taught me how to appreciate art.
That's fair.
She taught me how to, like, get really close to it, look at it from a different way, look at it from an angle, look at it and don't think anything. And, God, I remember, because you have, once you break down, like, the thought of just, like, oh, I wonder, I mean, there's also the thought of enjoying, like, oh, I wonder how he achieved this, or...
Right, the technical
and
application.
There's a lot to it, but then there's that, like, what does my mind, like, does the substance of my mind experience with this piece? And I remember, I was in Kansas City, which, great city, really cool art scene. I was at this modern art gallery, and I was staring at this piece that was mostly like made of yarn, and it had like this diamond shape in it. And the weirdest thing happened to me. I'm looking at this piece, and all of a sudden my mind is just going quiet, and I'm just like sinking into the piece, like I'm having like a quasi psychedelic effect.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah.
And I'd never had that, but I think I stared at it for like almost 20 minutes, and like, if I had not been there with another person, like on a vacation, like if I would have stayed longer, I don't know what would have happened.
Yeah.
And I love in your pieces, because I've had the pleasure of seeing you paint too, just like the process of how things come out, and you watch Pat work, and it's just like, oh, like you're starting to like think what it's going to be, and then it just, yeah. And I always see in the pieces, well, it's interesting. As I've seen more of your pieces, what I used to think I'd always see in your pieces was guts, like
okay,
innards.
Yeah, definitely.
And the piece when I first met you last year, that one I definitely felt had some guts to it. But then I started watching other pieces, and I saw a lot of animals. And in this, I see a lot of eyes, like, and then like the inner nerd in me thinks of like some psychedelic, like astral being.
Right, sure. And I mean, that's kind of the tightrope walk that I kind of try to maneuver is, like, how can I add just enough content to like anchor people's perspectives into a certain place, but then give them just enough to wander into their own subjectivity. And so, like, I've learned, like, you put two balls, your circles next to each other, you're either looking at testicles, boobs, or eyeballs. Like, those are the three directions people take it. Hey, Mom. And personally, I'd like it. It's something where it like when I was going to art school, when I was at the Art Institute, they kind of tried to make intuitive or psychic automatism. That's their awesome, like, academia term for it. But they
try a rad term.
I love it. I'm like, dude, it's like they use it as a bash. You know what I'm saying? Like, if that's like one of those diss track moments where like you walk into a critique and a teacher's like, it's psychic automatism. The whole class is gonna go, oh damn, she said what? Like everyone's gonna look at you like a Momo. And trust me, you don't want to look like a Momo in art school. You know what I'm saying?
I've heard about the prevalence of pretense in certain artistic and academic circles.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's because like I went through that circle and had to kind of defend myself, because on one end, it's like when your intuition is stalemated to a certain place. And this is what I mean by the two circles next to each other and these like kind of motifs that are, I want to say, predictable. You know what I'm saying? It's like there's a point where you get to a muscle reflex with your intuition. You know what I'm saying? Where it's like you're walking this line of abstract but still meaning, and trying to tie it into a loose tightness. It's, for me, it's like that's why I work in such a weird way of like erasing a lot of things, and kind of like those guts will appear, these one like little layers of the preliminaries will blend into the way end, and it's like I like to work with deleting things really fast, or just like kind of like allowing the image to speak back in a sense like that, because I do find that intuition can be a stalemate where I'm just doing the same thing over and over, but I think in my head it's like a Dave Matthews Band song. You know, it's like, who got your ball? That's every song that he sings. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, I personally want to stray away from, you know, having things be more of a reflex into a place of control and surprise, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And it leads me to what like formally was the topic of the conversation today, which is, you know, where does art come from? And, you know, I've had extremely limited experiences producing like art in this form. But I have like my theory, which is essentially that art, or the creation of art, is a projection of like the inner self onto the medium. And that it ties in with that subjectivity of it. You know, I kind of think that more or less all people have the same inner essence. Like there's only one type of thing that can be molded. And, you know, I've always heard the analogy to like a computer. All people have the same or very similar hardware.
Sure.
The software can be very different. But even that is within parameters of the hardware. And so, like, I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that, like, as the artist, like, as someone who has the talent and, you know, an understanding of how to do these things. And then also, like, because what you were saying with, when we were discussing viewing art, you know, when you're viewing the art, you know, you have that same experience. You know, because of whatever my inner self and, you know, sort of essence is, I'm going to project that when I see this.
Absolutely. Yeah. 100%. And that's what I feel like a lot of art just like ends up being a mirror at the end of it. You know what I'm saying? Like I could watch a horror movie and be in like this like honeymoon phase of life and just be all dapper, but I'm still going to project whatever I'm in to even the opposite of what the media or stimuli of the art form is. And so for me, that's why I like the complexities of the subjectivity. You know what I'm saying? Because in my mind, it's like, because everything is experienced subjectively, I think that art in its earliest form, like when you first asked me where does art come from, obviously I was like lineage based. I was like, all right, so cave paintings, you know what I'm saying? Out there in the fucking French caves and
somebody went to art school.
Yeah. Hey, mom. And so like for me, I personally think that the beginning of creativity is like a good way to add perspective to the question of where it comes from. Because I think it's like it's a language, you know what I'm saying? Like everything that is expressive is kind of a language-based experience for yourself and for the outside world. And so I used to ask people all the time, like, if you were the last person on Earth, would you still paint or would you still make music and all these things? And so kind of like a lot of the times, I would say 80% of the times, of course, you got the people that are like, fuck it, I can't live without it. And even if people don't look at it or if I'm not engaged in the community, I'm still going to do it. But I'd say roughly 80 to 90% of the time, people say, what would be the purpose of making art if there was nobody else to communicate it with?
And is that mostly talking to like fellow artists?
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Other fellow artists. And so I think that like at the core of it, it's like where it comes from is this like, for me, it's boredom based, where it's like, you know, words can only accomplish so much. And so a painting can do something more, but it does something less, obviously, you know, like depending on what senses are being used for the media. But I think that, yeah, it really just comes down to what's the yearning to express something? Where does that come from? You know what I'm saying? And I think that that's just a very human-based variable, you know what I'm saying?
It's interesting that you bring that up because I was just starting last night to write an essay on what is meaning. You know, like what is the inner phenomena? Yeah, but I mean, it's less it's less hackneyed than you think, because I even brought it up to a friend. I said, what gives meaning in your life? And he's like, nothing. And because as I continue to talk to him, and he did give me some good insights, you know, he's talking about like, you know, what's the meaning of life? And that's not at all what I'm saying. Meaning is an inner subjective phenomena.
Right, you're right.
It's and as I kept thinking about it and reading what some other thinkers had to say about it, meaning is, to me, it's like a force in human psyche that is either very strong and pronounced in a person. They really need their life to have meaning, the things they do to have meaning. They feel very uncomfortable or even get depressed if there are things that are not very meaningful. And there's other people who are a little more content just to be, they may still want to do meaningful things like spend time with friends, family, have an adventure from time to time, have a job they at least like. But, like when I am not involved with things that are like meaningful to me, like my body and psyche starts like shutting down.
Oh, same. Completely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so I'm wondering like how much, that inner force is what drives people for above spirituality, souls who have that pronounced in their life to create.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of, you nailed it again, my guy. This guy, where's your hammer? Ha, 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 ha. But no, so like...
That was a good one.
So that's actually like I think, pinnacle of what this style represents for me is I've worked probably about 15 to 17 years of this kind of like Gestalt, double imagery, like people decide their own meaning and that kind of thing. And I think that the original kind of my inclination for it has always been that this is a playground for people to kind of have something safe and fun to investigate. Oh, there's more meaning than I initially thought of. You know what I'm saying? Because it's not about like getting people to second guess their instincts or their form of truth and meaning and to have them reevaluate their value structures. It's really just like, actually, there's a whole like that is just a perspective. Like all that meaning and all that like subjectivity, it's just a matter of perspective. And so I think that it's like a healthy thing that we're going through evolutionary to like kind of switch up our own subjectivity and to branch it into like, like there's a positive thing going on when I take my shoes off and put somebody else's on. You know what I'm saying? And it's not just for the sustainability of civilization itself. It's about, like...
You get to experience the mind differently. Yeah. You get to experience the self differently.
It makes the meaning and value structure of life for me personally a little bit less like, ooh, spiky and walking on glass. You know what I'm saying? It's so serious. It's like, wait, no, hold on. If I can just like reach out and communicate and like those commissions that we were just talking about that I make, when I do those, I'll sit down with somebody for 2 to 3 hours and I'll not even with an intention of painting. I'll just go, so how you been? And just by listening to people's like moment in time, I start seeing these loops and these reoccurring factors and these tones. And then all of a sudden I'm like, all right, was there a moment in your history? Blah, blah, blah. And then most of the time people look at me like, holy shit, you just figured that out real quick, And I'm not trying to pat myself on the back for having some therapist guru shit. It's really just like, when people hear themselves like cycle things and then like there's an intention behind it, like creating a piece of art or something, I think that it's really neat to see people have their reflection subjectively, but then it becomes objective in a weird sense. You know what I'm saying?
Well, it becomes almost crystalline.
Exactly.
It starts as this nebulous thought, in more spiritual circles, you might, in like yoga terms, they call it chitta or chit, which is like, I'm involved with a place called the School of Metaphysics. We use a more like English word, we call it mind substance. So there's like a substance of the mind that in many ways desires to become physical, even if that's just physical absolutely. As I hear it as a thought in my head or a feeling in my body. And okay, so let me run something by you. So on that kind of thing.
Let's do it.
So my theory of like where art comes from is that there is maybe like this inner energy of the mind. And you could debate whether or not it's based on, like totally physical. It's just based on whatever is the wiring of like my nervous system and specifically like my brain. And that unique configuration is how I will produce art. You could get more metaphysical with it. You could say there is a transcendent sort of non-physical element of the mind, which in yoga is considered to be made out of the substance called like a chitta, or a mind substance, if you wanted to speak it a little more plainly, and that there's processes in it. Either way doesn't really matter because subjectively it more seems to be the latter, just subjectively. It's, we all use the word energy, even though plenty of people who say that, don't believe that there's like a conscious energy of the universe, which is fine. But use the word energy because it captures it. And so my theory is that in the deeper part of the mind, there are these processes of this sort of mental substance that seeking to come out, and also I should say that the nature of this substance is that which is within the mind wants to come out into the physical, you could say. That's like its nature for relatively all people. And that people who have whatever sort of processes or built-in stuff that like makes them more geared towards art, even though anyone could enjoy it, that is part of like how their art will come out because of that inner sea.
Right. Yeah. It's like almost like the closest you can get your eyeball to Bailey's without getting it wet.
Oh my God, you just made an old Gregor.
No, I totally hear what you're saying. It's, for me, like if I categorize things in terms of those kind of truths, you know what I'm saying? I feel like that in the past I've gotten a little bit lost in the sauce doing that, and like it's weird that I was thinking about this the other day. Like I make abstract art, but I really don't go too far with defining those abstract motifs. But I love the way that you phrased it because it's like, you could be a science-minded individual, an esoteric, you could have any kind of like archetypical mind and belief structure and still talk about the same things, which is why I'm excited to be on this podcast because I love that you guys do that on like a balanced motif, But yeah, no, I think that it's really just like the essence, you know what I'm saying? Like that yearning essence, man. And it's really hard to capture or like even communicate to people that are non-artists or not interested in it. And I think that that's one of the things that makes art like a language-based thing because it's not really like the yearning to communicate. It might just, for me, it's just like picking up a paintbrush. That's literally, I know that that's the most cop-out statement of all time, but it's like, that feeling that really, esoteric, fertile and fragile substance you were talking about, like that decides what color I choose first. And then the brush size. And then all of a sudden we have a shape. That shape is being counteracted by this, and then there's a communication happening on the board that like I almost like feel like that I'm working through to get a.
How like in the zone do you feel when you're making art? Like how much is it like a planned thing versus like the zone and feeling thing? Do you kind of go in and out?
Yeah, I try to go in and out. I think that's the one thing that art school kind of helped me learn because they try to beat my head over with a conceptual stick. You know what I'm saying? And after hours of battling, like, no, man, intuition, bro, fucking flow state, alpha, beta, gamma wavelengths, man. Like after, years of doing that, they were just like, all right, dude, you're the weird hippie stoner kid that makes good art. Fuck you,
Yeah.
And so like I finally got to a point where like I understood them and they started to understand where I was coming from. And I feel like that blessed me with kind of a gift of like being able to jump into a flow state, you know what I'm saying? And like turning my brain off completely and just letting my intuition drive everything. But then also at moments taking a step back and going, where are we? Where do I need to throw a life preserver in the water? Do I need to, construct a ladder to get out of this hole I just dug? And it's like, it's kind of like a tiptoeing back and forth balance. And which I also think is sort of where those pockets of esotericism or like what's the term that you're saying?
The mind substance, the chit.
Yes, the mind substance. Yeah.
Well, what we teach over at the School of Metaphysics. I just want to check. How are we doing on time, Alexander? 24. Okay, cool. One of the things we teach over at the School of Metaphysics is we try to teach people how to use their conscious mind and their subconscious mind.
Right. Yeah.
And what seems to be the nature of it is the conscious mind is exactly what you think. It's planning. It's executive. It's logic.
Right.
It's
survival.
It's thoughts in the head, it's in the moment. And then the subconscious mind it's not an active thing you usually use. It's more of a thing that like people like to use the word download or like received. And the way that we teach people to use it is like you do something consciously, use your conscious mind, you think of something, you might visualize it. And visualization, as far as I'm concerned, doesn't even have to be like trying to make a picture in your head. It's just creating an idea. And then you do that as an active process. And then what they recommend is taking your attention off of it. maybe doing something else. And this sort of takes the thought and inserts it backwards into the mind. And then because the nature of the mind substance and the thought is to want to, you could say, manifest, it will come out. And so it makes, so they often say, like, you know, get involved with a project and then pull back, and then come back to it. And oftentimes there would be like this sort of clearness to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, 100%. I mean, even taking steps back, I feel like a lot of the time in my early work when I was doing abstract processes, it would be, I'd be like, if I step away now, you know, if I unlatch from the teat now, I will never get a drop of milk again, you know? But like now that I'm kind of getting older and I guess a little bit more familiar with the outcome of things,
a little more confident.
Yeah, I guess you could say, just like a little bit more aware of like how the math works. It's like now I almost want to set my paintings down. Like I almost want to like unlatch for 2 to 3 days, or like let things get dusty and come back to it, because that initial essence, it's like it's gonna re-spark, you know. And it took some training to kind of get to this point where I can, you know, kind of feel confident that I'll be in the same headspace, or at least somewhere that works well with an image that I'm jumping back into. But yeah, it's kind of a hodgepodge thing.
Well, what we also discuss at our school of metaphysics, is how, like, you know, what people don't always realize, because the subconscious, it's, I mean, unless you're like literally like a yogi and like your big thing is subconscious mind training and like outer stillness, which is difficult to even like function in the Western world. Like, you know, in India, if you do that, like you stop participating in the economy, because you're just not gonna be very successful, or it's going to be very difficult to do both. Although some people have done it. But anyway, what people don't realize is just because you can't see the subconscious very well, it's often described as primarily being still or silent. It doesn't mean that things aren't happening. And so what we often, to your point, what kind of makes me, this kind of verifies it to me, that, you know, while you've let go of something, we say you've released it to the inner subconscious self, which to me, I think is a big part of where art comes from. In fact, at my school, we just say that the subconscious mind is what's, you know, like when you say the word soul, that's what you're talking about.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah, it made a lot of sense. And so it's sort of like churning, and it is collecting in the mind substance. And what we say is that in this subconscious mind substance are all sorts of other ideas, images, things that you have learned deeply into yourself. And if you believe in something like reincarnation, you would say this is where the things you've learned in other lives are stored. And then even more, we say that in metaphysics, that this is where like other people's images and ideas can sort of come into what you would classify as my mind. And so when you take your attention off of it and you're doing other things in the conscious mind, you allow those processes to be unimpeded.
Yeah, 100%. And like I said before, it's like I used to use this fucking used car salesman one-liner. It's training wheels for the evolving mind. And I would look at people like this too and be like, laugh at me because it's cheesy. But it really is something of that essence, where it's like, because I'm kind of, or a lot of abstract artists, you're almost like creating this playground that makes it more accessible or just more fun in general to kind of get to those chewed down bits where, you know, like the worst lies that are told are the ones we say to ourselves, you know? And so in my mind, it's like we all do that. Like there's always going to be blind spots. And to connect those strings, I feel like is really monumental. You know what I'm saying? And so like one of the things that I feel like puts up a wall between people making connections, including myself. Sorry, I'm just going to speak subjectively here. But the thing that blocks me out from seeing connections, or like, oh man, isn't it weird how like I hate Pokemon, and that one time I like had a traumatic event with Pokemon involved? You know, like bullshit example right there, but nonetheless, it's like that you can make these connections once, or I can make these connections once I kind of allow myself to be in a headspace where I'm like, huh, you know what I'm saying? Like it's so much different to look at for me to look in the mirror and be like, interesting, than it is to be like, oh man, like what's going on here? You know, like where just, it's like, here's one that I'm pretty proud of. It's like, what's the difference between confusion and curiosity?
Probably confusion's just being a little, it's kind of a similar thing if it's seeking for something within or without. It's seeking something within in the mind but confusion is less comfortable, whereas curiosity is
right. And I feel like it's the difference is a choice that we all make personally.
That helps me like so much that you said that. So one last thing I want to touch base on before we wrap up this segment is, tell me, like, what have you learned about how do you get into a flow state? Like, how is that? Like, what's your one easy secret?
Well, I buy Patty's homegrown tomatoes, found here at the link below. No, for me personally, it can be. First off, I have to feel out the moment. You know what I'm saying? Because if I'm relying on a flow state method that I'm used to in my studio, and then I'm at a festival with 3,000 people staring at me, it is not going to be the same. So I feel like that the most important thing for myself is to acknowledge what is happening in this moment and to kind of like go with it, to be a part of the energy source itself. So it's like if I try to resist, like if I try to go hide in the dark corner and paint this small piece when there's like a live audience, you know, like I feel like that is, it's not really flowing well, and I'm not going to be able to jump into a good regime, a good process. But if I kind of like feel it out where I'm like, ooh, this is what's happening right now. Like, all right, then let's entertain some of these variables and kind of like apply myself to what's happening, you know?
And so you kind of really have to feel like the energies within the mind and maybe even like at the body.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, 100%. And I try not to keep it conscious where it's like, today I'm feeling red, you know, like I don't do that kind of thing. I usually let it happen a little bit more organically. But that's organically is another term for it, where it's just like making decisions that are not about resistance and then maybe
just true to the truth, you know, if you're feeling like shit and it's
relevant,
like, you really need to like take it slow, or like, you know, I've always found it difficult. I do writing to like write and like force myself to write. It's a miserable process.
But it makes you so much stronger. It really does. Like painting in those moments where I don't want to paint. Those are the reasons why I'm still an artist. If that makes sense.
I hate that you said that, but that actually, I hope the audience gets a lot out of that. I mean, I know that actually helps like so much right now, because I'm trying to write more and maybe eventually put some of my writings on the website.
Well, I mean, again, like jumping into flow state, it's like maybe you have an expectation. I'm sorry if I'm reading your poem right now, but maybe you have an expectation of things. I've done this before. I've reached this level with that poem or that essay, and everything must hit that pitch.
That's exactly it.
That's what it is. And because like for me, it's like I feel like that most of my banger paintings, the ones that have sold for thousands and thousands of dollars, they all started from like me just not caring about me not being good in that moment. And I'm not saying like I was going through anything or like, you know what I'm saying? Like just me going up to a canvas and being like, I don't feel it. Let's just see what happens. I'm shitting you not. 9 out of 10 times that painting is going to be one that everyone tracks me down for a copy of, or yada, yada, yada. And it's like, I feel like that some of those truths, it's like, I don't know how to think of it, because I don't want to define what's going on there esoterically, but like, really does have a feeling that like when I overcome not a slump, but just like when I get out of my own way, then that whatever process is occurring in that moment, like this one, it's just slaps. It's just like it reads as truth to myself. And some of these like subliminal subconscious decisions I think are going to be read by people's own programming, because the subconscious is so insanely strong in all of us that like one little decision right here is going to read totally different, even from somebody who's not an artist or a trained audience member. You know what I'm saying? It's just like the truth of what I did in this moment is going to be way more accessible than what I was trying to get at, or like trying to reach a bar of excellence that I had in the past.
I really hope the audience gets something out of that. I'm just glad you came today, because that was literally,
absolutely.
I needed that. So thank you. Pat, let's sign off today. So, but we're going to have a little more with Pat, so don't worry. But just plug your shit, man. Tell us about how people can reach you. We're going to have it linked and stuff.
All right. Can you guys share my OnlyFans page? Can you holler at me at any fucking... No, I'm just kidding. Hit me up on my socials. I do have my website I'm working on right now. Patt Knerr. It's kind of a weird one. Patttknerr.
It will be spelled. You won't have to try to figure that out.
There you go. Yeah. I'm like the most Russian American ever. You know, it's there. But figure it out, you know. Reach out, say what's up, message me. I'm always open for conversation.
And you sell both pieces. Do you still do prints?
You know, the one thing I've been offering is people that want to buy prints, I give them a high-res image of my work. So if I have plans to do canvas prints, then yeah, you can buy one off me. But personally, it's like I'd like to do commissions and connect with people a little
And
bit
still
more.
open for the commission.
Absolutely, the commissions are numero uno. Like I could be making probably $500 just passive income off prints a month, but that's just so much.
Yeah, that's like actual like.
I don't want to have to deal with that, and also like there's gonna be one or two prints that don't weasel their way home. So, but anyways, yeah, hit me up on my socials. I'll be around.
Well, Patt Knerr, everyone. Thank you so much, and signing out for right now. Bro, that was a great interview.